In Mario Kart, the further behind the pack you are, the better the power-ups you get. Features like this are called Catchup Mechanics, and used correctly, they can be a great way to increase and maintain the drama of a competitive game. When applied too heavily though, Catchup Mechanics can mess with the game's heuristics to the point that, for example, players may actively avoid trying to get the lead for much of the race. So, do Catchup Mechanics exist in the political game of elections? If elections did have strong catch-up mechanics, we would expect to see a lot of close elections, and the candidate who is behind would usually be narrowing the gap at the end. Well, that pretty much defines the experience of most US presidential elections in recent memory. The last one was so close that, due to the Electoral College, the candidate with fewer votes won. You can't get much closer than that. So it is pretty clear that, at least in presidential elections, there are strong catch-up mechanics at work. But what are they? And does it matter? Now, before we get into the weeds here, it is important to note, catch-up mechanics aren't the same thing as tactics which may help the player who's falling behind, like the onside kick in football. Those tactics are just a player's approach to their situation, the heuristic they may temporarily deploy in an attempt to close the gap. Catch-up mechanics, on the other hand, are built into the game. They structurally give advantages to the losing player. For example, say a player does something good and scores 2 points, putting them in the lead. But then the next time they do an equally good thing, because they are ahead, they only score 1 point. That would be a clear catch-up mechanic making sure that the leader doesn't run away with an impossible lead. So, now that we know how these mechanics work, let's look at a few of the more interesting catch-up features built into the US election system. First is the press. During elections, while candidates play their game of get the most votes, the press is playing its own orthogonal game of get the most ratings, where they compete for ad dollars and viewers. The best way to attract both is with an exciting story, and a close election will get way more viewers than a landslide. Even in today's hyper-partisan press environment, there is a need for an election to be exciting to attract viewers. And the press has a profound effect on voters. They can draw widespread attention to the leading candidate's negative aspects or the losing candidate's positive aspects, swaying public opinion in a way that is very powerful and should not be underestimated. And, luckily for the press, the candidate who is behind in the polls generally throws out some shocking accusations late in the election cycle, making for some pretty hot stories as the campaign season approaches its finale. Furthermore, if we look at more highly polarized news outlets like MSNBC or Fox, we find that they build ideological walls around their viewers, making those voters less and less likely to even hear bad news about their candidates. This makes a whole lot of voters essentially unwinnable by the other side. These gimme votes prevent any candidate's lead from becoming so large as to be insurmountable. This makes the press a pretty clear and significant catch-up mechanic. Another catch-up mechanic, third parties. When third parties enter elections, weird stuff starts to happen. And more often than not, they pull more votes away from the candidate who is ahead than the losing candidate. So third parties are definitely a catch-up mechanic too. Money is a catch-up mechanic also. There's a big argument over how much impact money really has on elections, but one thing we can say for sure is that it is better to have it than to not have it. It's also safe to say that any feature which encourages more money to be given to the candidate who is behind can be thought of as a catch-up mechanic, and that happens in 2 ways. First is both sides money. Many interest groups take a very long view with their donations. These groups give money to both sides, ensuring that no matter who wins, they will have some influence. And if the political winds happen to change next election, well, then they will have a history of investing in that side too. The financial sector is well known for this tactic. They might give more money to one side or the other, but you can always find financial sector donations going to both parties. But there's also issue money, which is money donated to a candidate simply because they have taken a strong stance on a particular issue. You could be losing the election by 30 points, but the NRA will still give you money if you are the more pro-gun candidate. And that money is not being given in the belief that it'll help you win. It's being given to send a message to the eventual winner, no matter who that winner is, that the NRA will not lie down on their key issues. Yet another form of catch-up mechanics is the low-information voter. In the game show Jeopardy, each round is worth more points than the previous one, giving the player who is falling behind some hope of closing the gap. This increase of randomness is definitely a catch-up mechanic, even though it also gives the player who is winning an equal chance of increasing their lead further. In politics, there's a similar structure going on with low-information swing voters. Now, the term low-information voter is not a comment about intelligence. It defines voters who just don't spend their days consuming news about political issues. These voters don't really pay attention until the end of our outrageously long campaign seasons, and they don't make their voting decision based on the complex policy issues, but on things like likability, a single issue that they really care about, or late-breaking news. These late-breaking victory points are just like Final Jeopardy. They represent a massive catch-up opportunity. Now, here is why all of this is important. In the last episode, we talked about win charts, which reflect a candidate's chances of winning at any given point in the game. Here is what a win chart looks like to the casual observer when a game has strong catch-up mechanics in place. Just look at all those spikes. This game is all over the place. The lead is changing hands over and over. But if you're one of the experts playing this game, then you see this very differently. To the expert, the real win chart for this game would look like this. Strategy and heuristics are planned by knowing where you are on a win chart, but in a game with strong catch-up opportunity, experts know that they are never actually very far ahead or behind. The lead can change so quickly and frequently, they might as well be neck and neck with their opponent. In addition, players who understand the game's catch-up mechanics can take advantage of them, maximizing or minimizing their effects, just like that player who lags behind in Mario Kart in hopes of getting a better power-up. For example, in most US presidential elections, you can pretty much count on the candidate who believes they are currently losing to launch over-the-top fear-based ads in the last week. Those ads are designed to maximize the catch-up opportunity with late-breaking, low-information voters. Fear is always a powerful motivator, and those voters don't have the background knowledge to know if the fear being pushed in those ads is justified. There have also been cases of shadow campaigns being deployed in past elections. These are scenarios where the underdog campaign offers hidden support to a third-party candidate, inducing them to run and, hopefully, siphon off some votes from the leader. My overall point here is that knowing why candidates do what they do will allow us to more accurately parse truth, making us more effective and informed participants in this process. And if you desire to work on a campaign or run for office yourself, well, knowing these catch-up mechanics could end up being just as important as your winning ideas. See you next time.